Hey guys, this is Phil Galfond from BlueFirePoker.com. Today I'm going to be doing something that I've had a lot of requests for, and this is playing some PLO against some of the tough regulars. So I sat in these games. Here on the left table, we have the Ashman, who's one of the toughest regs, as well as Booby Smiles, another one of the toughest regs. Both of them are very, very aggressive, especially throughout hands, but they both get in a lot pre-flop, fairly light. That's going to be really difficult for me on this right table with Booby Smiles in position to me at a 250 big blind table. The Giant, also another reg I don't have much experience with, and Sim can be said for Fudgesicle. And Gretko, it seemed like the game was forming around him, but I've never seen him before. And I'm completely readless on him. So I guess I'll just get started in the action and talk about it from there. Here on the left table, I believe Booby Smiles made it 150. Gretko called, Ashman called. I called the last 100 with Ace King Queen 6. Flop top 2 on a 3 flush board. And it gets checked around on the flop. On the turn, it gets checked to me, and I decide to bet. I think that it's by no means a mandatory bet, but it is, I think, a good spot to two-barrel bluff. When it goes four-way, I think there's very likely somebody has a flush, at least marginal flush, and will likely call the turn. But I think when I bet into three people twice or once, and then into one person on the river. It looks very, very strong. I also do have my 4 outs to improve to a boat, which actually could be even better for me because if I do bet when I hit a boat, sometimes I get bluff raised or raised by a worse boat, or I get up for a check raise on the river if I do hit. And if I don't hit, my plan here was to bet the river again. And this is something that against a lot of weaker opponents I wouldn't do, but one thing I'll be talking about a lot in this video is when you play against the tough regulars, you really have to mix up your game quite a bit. Here I hit the boat. I'm just going to bet. You can go for a check raise, but I think it's pretty bad because his most likely hand is a marginal flush, like a jack-high flush. He's never going to bet when I check to him. He may make a hero call when I bet. And also, somebody, I don't know much about him, but he could take his jack-high flush and turn it into a bluff raise, thinking that I have like a nut flush. I'm scared of the board pairing river. So I think a bet here is far superior to a check raise, at least most of the time. But like I was kind of in the middle of saying, against really tough regulars, you can't just go with the quote-unquote standard or best play because a lot of your game should be focused on doing things that they won't expect you to do. Excuse me, I do have a cough, so I might cough a little bit throughout this video. But I definitely make a very conscious effort to disguise my hand, disguise my ranges, much more often than usual. Here on the right table, it's actually a very good spot to two-barrel in general. He's calling the flop with just like any overpair, any pair plus gut shot, any 7-9, any 7-5, probably most 4-5s. So I think betting here is fine and kind of I wouldn't want to say standard. You don't want to get too carried away, but it probably will show profit against a lot of opponents. I decided to check because I have been, before this I was actually six-tabling these 25-50 games and had been in a lot of situations with Booby Smiles where I bet the flop, he called in position, and I checked the turn and he bet, and sometimes I called, sometimes I folded, sometimes I raised, but I thought that he wouldn't give me a ton of credit for betting into him again, just because of how often he'd been betting when I checked to him. So I felt like it was possible he would bluff raise or call me light once or twice. And what I was hoping to do here was get the turn check through and make an extremely, in my opinion, credible bluff on the river. After the turn goes check-check, it looks like maybe I was trying to check call with a weak flush or a set or something like that for pot control. Potentially trying to check raise with a big hand, like a nut flush, but if he does bet the turn, I have to fold. I don't really love check raising as a bluff here. When the three pairs, I'd almost prefer it didn't, but I'm fine with it, and I still think it's a very credible bluff and one that'll work fairly often. And it's 601K, gives me a really good price. just because his range is so weak there. So I think that works out for me very well, or very often. Here on the left table, I 3-bet. Like I said, I don't have a lot of reads on this player, Gretko. That name makes me cough. But he seemed to be, if anyone is, at least the spot at this table. So I'm a little more inclined to isolate, get into pots with him. So here I 3-bet. Even against a tough player, 3-betting a double-suited hand like this in position is probably going to show a profit. And I get 4-bet. Obviously not a great situation to be in, especially because he's going to 4-bet very well with like ace, king, jack 10 double suited. Hands that do very well against me, as well as like double suited kings that do very well against me. However, I still think I can call. It's a hand that's fairly connected, double suited, 2-to-1 pot odds, and I get to act last on the flop, which some would consider a disadvantage, but sometimes it's not all that bad. I flop 2 pair and get it in. I'm a slight favorite, or kind of decent favorite, and boat up on the turn and hold up. So nice big pot for me early. Here on the right table, he 3-bets me in position. He's going to be doing this, seriously, if I had to guess, maybe 30% of hands. He's going to be doing this very, very wide. Excuse me. Maybe even more than 30, like 35. I think folding here is actually okay, with a hand as weak as this. I think calling's not bad. I opted to 4-bet, and I know that with a hand that you can consider folding with, that seems ridiculous. But my logic is, if I 4-bet, I can make it about 20, 21, 2200. Yeah, 22.6. If he calls, which he most often will call, there's going to be about 4,600 in the pot and about 11K in stacks. And these are actually really good stack sizes, in my opinion, to be 4-bet bluffing with. And the reason I like a hand like this for it, even though it has such bad pre-flop equity and doesn't play that well on flops, is that a lot of the disconnected boards, he's actually going to have, 1 pair and no draw. And with a hand like that has, 30-ish% equity against aces, he's not going to be able to play once I make a c-bet. I think he's going to put me on aces an overwhelming majority of the time to 4-bet. I haven't been 4-betting him that much. So I actually think I have a lot of fold equity on boards that don't give him on boards that don't give him pair plus gutter or better. Basically, 40+% equity against aces. On the boards that do hit me, obviously they're rare, but on like a let's say, I don't know, 2-4-6 board, I think I can actually induce a lot of bluffing from him. I can either check or I can go for like a small c-bet, I think would be my standard. And I wouldn't be surprised if he made like a min raise as a bluff occasionally, or shoved, with just like queens or 1 pair and a gutter, something really light, because those are boards that usually will completely whiff the 4-better's range, and he basically will be getting in with either aces or he'll be bet folding. So that said, is this a standard play? No, not by any means. Is it a plus EV play? I'm not so sure. I'm not positive. But certainly good for my range, and I think that the reasons I had are sound. Whether they're enough to overcome my disadvantage pre-flop in equity, I'm not so sure. But in videos, I think one thing I've always tried to focus on in training videos is just to get across all the reasons for making a play, and whether the play is right or wrong is not really the point. What the point is to get you guys watching the videos to be thinking about all the reasons that you're making plays, some reasons to make plays that hadn't occurred to you, and hopefully that'll even spark some reasons that you think of plays on your own that I haven't even talked about or thought of myself. So bottom pair and a gutter I could actually be in awful shape here sometimes, and I'm just going to bet fold. This is the type of board that I was talking about. Like, if he has a hand even as strong as like King Queen Jack 10, I'm not positive he gets it in. He probably does, but if he gives me enough credit for having a really strong four betting range, he could actually find a fold with a hand like that. Will he? Probably not. But he could also have hands like, I mean, he can have a ton of hands pre-flop, basically, is what I'm saying. Like, he could have Queen Queen 7-4. He would fold that. I mean, Jack Jack Deuce Deuce. All these hands that he would be three betting with that could potentially fold here. So I do think this is a profitable C bet. And even though I do have, my pair plus gutter, I have to fold to a shove, in my opinion, just because of all the ways I could be in terrible, terrible shape. So he takes his time and shoves. I'm just going to fold. Unfortunately, I lost a little bit, or a decent amount of money there. I'm sorry about the coughing, guys. I can't help it. So, even though that didn't work out and I lost a good bit of money, I think that having plays like that in my arsenal will make me tougher to play against the regulars, and that's not a play I would make against some weaker players who are not three betting as much in position, and also who could not make the kind of tough folds. But I do think it's important to always be thinking through hands and never do just the standard thing to do when you're playing against tough regs. Here on the right table, call pre-flop standard, call flop very standard. I turn the nuts on a very draw-heavy board. Stacks are not great for me to be raising. I mean, I think raise is still a very, I don't know, a very valid option. Maybe the best play. But it's just kind of bad because he can call with a lot of draws and be set up for, well, let's see, I make it, 2,600, let's say. So that would be 52, 62 in the pot, and just about that left in stacks, or a little less, like 6K left in stacks. So it sets him up for a nice shove on any heart, any spade, any seven, and then I'm left guessing, and he can do that with pretty good balanced ranges. And yes, I can be raising here with a huge draw, and then he could get in trouble bluffing when my draw hits. But it does kind of put him in a decent position. That said, I think that my standard here is to raise. I opted just to call, and I think that's fine too. On the brick rivers, I think he barrels fairly often or value bets too thinly, and maybe calls bluff raise, or thinking I'm bluff raising when I value raise. Eight of hearts, not a good river. And I'm just going to check it back and take my hand to showdown. Not a whole lot to think about there, in my opinion. Nothing missed, so it's really hard for me to make a thin value bet there and have him think I could be bluffing. And, he had the type of hand. I don't think he was going to... well, he could have called a raise. I don't think he would. It was just... what's that? Gutter plus flush draw. He could have called a raise and then bluffed that river, and who knows what I would do. I think it's a really tough decision that I would have been put to. Okay, so here on the left table, excuse me, Ashman raises the button. I just call with some pretty weak aces. I think this is pretty standard anyways, but with Booby Smiles in the big blind, who's three betting a very wide range, or wider than most, I think it makes it a even more attractive a play to just be calling there. I flop top set. I also have the ace of clubs, and so the plan here is, I mean, in my opinion, I think the best play is just check call twice if Ashman bets, which he does, and if the board pairs, bluff the river, or not bluff the river, bet the river into him. And if flush card hits, bluff the river. Here it looks like, I'm considering raising. I don't think it's terrible. I do. One thing when you have top set, even when it's not the nuts, you want to consider if you can get it in against second or third set. But I actually think on a board like this, Ashman checks back some queen queen and king king type hands. So in general, in a spot where somebody would be betting second set or third set, at least most of the time, you do want to consider getting it in or trying to force money in with your top set. First of all, you aren't in terrible shape if he does have the straight here. You have two shots at your boat, and if he does have king king or queen queen, you're in phenomenal shape. Two of us call, as I 3-bet in position with a decent hand on the right table. 10 jack 8 deuce double suited. And we actually have a couple interesting hands going on here. I'm going to focus on the hand on the left table right now, and then I'm going to rewind and talk about the hand on the right table. So ignore the right table for now. Left table, he bets again. I still think it's an extremely easy call, and I think that my bluff on a club river looks very, very, very credible. And I actually expect to get more calls on a board pairing river from Jack 10 than on a club river. So this is a great scenario for me to be in. I'm very happy to be calling here. The reason I say that is because I think he would actually give me a lot of credit for having a hand like Ace 10 of clubs, XX, and be check calling twice here, especially with somebody behind me, trying to entice them to get into the pot, make it a three-way pot, and make my pot odds that much better. I think most people in an Ashman spot would not be bluffing here. After betting flop, getting called in two spots, I think Ashman though is very capable of it when he knows he's playing against two tough players who presumably would give him credit here most of the time. I think he can definitely mix it up and be bluffing here. Actually, a decent amount of the time, maybe 20-25% even, potentially more. So I call, pretty standard. And I know it's going to be tough. Just ignore the hand on the right. And I actually, the amount of time I took on the turn, I mean, it looked somewhat standard, but I had an automatic call. The amount of time I took was on purpose. Just because I think I would be thinking a lot there with a hand like Ace 10 of clubs, which is what I'm trying to represent. Or potentially a hand like Jack 10, I could be thinking there and slow playing. So I just try to balance my timing in a spot like that, even when I have an automatic call like this. He shoves the river. I have pretty good pot odds. Against most people, this would be a fold. I think against Ashman, I give him enough credit to make this call. I think he would do this with Jack-Jack or 10-10 the majority of the time he has those hands. Occasionally, I think he'd do it with, just low clubs and nothing else at all, or just a pair, or just like nothing at all. I mean, pretty rare, but I think it's possible. So, excuse me. I tanked for a while, I believe, and decided to call. Or I guess I was focused on this hand on the right table, which I'll go back and talk about, and so try to ignore that for now. So I decided to call. He does have Jack 10 with some low clubs, and I lose the big pot, but I'm pretty happy with the way I played it. Definitely very standard pre-flop, flop, and turn. And, made a river call, which I'm apt to do, and it didn't work out. So here on the right table, excuse me, guys, I'm really sorry. I'm going to try to drink some water and see if that slows down my cough. But I 3-bet and he calls. Alright, so I flop top and bottom on a board that does not connect well with many hands at all. and I decided to c-bet, planning on probably getting it in, just because I'm going to c-bet here pretty much always. And even though this isn't a monster by any means, top and bottom with no real redraws, um, I should be c-betting a hand this strong. I'm making about half pot. He pots it, committing himself, obviously. And now I have to think about what kind of hands he can have. For him to have Jack 5, it'd be pretty tough, although possible. It'd have to be a hand like, Ace King Jack 5 with a suit. That's pretty much it. I don't think he's opening like Jack 10, 9, 5, I think. Maybe double suited, he probably would, actually. So, those hands are possible. I'm in, fairly tough shape against those. I have the 8s and the 10s, and that's about it. Deuces. His most likely hands, though, in my opinion, are like kings with a flush draw. A lot of things with flush draws, like king, queen, jack 10 with a flush draw. Obviously, I'm not in great shape against those. He can also have some sets, although I have a jack and a deuce. And he could have a hand as weak as like a slow played, I don't know, ace, king 4, which, I'm not a massive favorite against, but I'm a pretty good favorite against. After, deliberating his range, and I think this is a really close spot, and, the amount of money already in the pot, I think I have to go with this hand. And I was deciding between, you can see, like, I played with going back and forth on shoving or calling. I decided to call, and my reasoning is twofold. One, I think is very flush draw heavy, and because of that, I'm comfortable calling the flop and folding if he jams a flush turn, because I don't think that he's going to be jamming the turn with like ace, king 4, or I don't know, like bottom 2 pair somehow, like 5, 4, 3 deuce. I don't think he would jam those on a flush card, because I think it looks like I'm very draw heavy. On a brick, he's certainly going to jam all his draws, and then I get in with better equity against his flush draws and straight draws, things like that. Another factor, that's the first factor. The second is that if I am beat by a hand like Jack 5 or 5-5, deuce deuce, Jack Jack, I actually save a little bit of money, in my opinion. Or I do save money when the flush hits the turn. If he jams, I'm going to fold, and I think he is, somewhat likely to jam with a set. And if he doesn't jam, if he decides to check, well, then I check back probably and see a free river and make a decision on the river. So I think by calling, since I can put his range kind of flush draw heavy, and I can expect him to not shove flush turns with the hands that are not flush draws very often, unless excuse me, unless they're sets and already have me beat. I think I make more money by just calling here and seeing a turn, giving up on a heart, on like a straightening card, especially like an ace. I have a very tough decision in my opinion, especially an ace, because he can have like ace, he can have like ace jack, etc., with a flush draw. He can even have like, he can have 3-4, obviously. So I think an ace, besides a heart, an ace is one of the cards that I could find a fold on, especially because I actually look a lot like I could have a draw like that. 4 is one of those cards in the middle. Like obviously on any card 6 or higher, offsuit 6 or higher, I'm just going with it. 3 and a 4 are a little bit awkward, because I think obviously he can have those like wheel draw plus flush draw, or ace 3, like I said. I said ace 4, but ace 3 is the same thing. He could have like a 6-4-3 with hearts, something like that. So this is kind of a scary card, and I'm not sure the right decision. I do have better than 2-1 here. If he does have a straight, I have 4 outs. That's not much, but something to consider. And I deliberated for a while. I ended up calling, and against his actual hand, it was correct, and I ended up holding up. He had the bottom pair, 2 overs, and not flush draw. And I think that his play is fine. He can get it in, Well, the thing is, he can never get it in that bad because he always has the nut flush draw. Against Jack Deuce, his eight's no good. Obviously, against a set, he's just looking for a flush, but it's never that bad. The thing is, it's tough for him to get it in good, pretty much ever. Whereas a lot of times with the nut flush draw and some higher pairs, you can get it in very, very good. But I think this hand works very well in his check raise bluffing range, and so I like his line. Um, and I think I like my line as well. Bet folding the flop is an option, but I feel pretty exploitable doing that just because it's kind of towards the top of my range, besides like overpair plus flush draw or sets. Here on the left table, I open with, what was that? Yeah, Queen 977, and I get 3-bet by Booby Smiles, and I just throw it away. It's a pretty bad hand, and he plays very well in 3-bet pots, even though he has a wide range. He plays that wide range very well, so I don't think I can show a profit calling there. On the right table, I open in all positions but the button when there's an ante. I open a 4x, maybe a little bit bigger. On the button, I open a 3x, and I think that's not, mandatory that you do that, but I do. I think it's worked well for me, and it makes sense because I want to. First of all, make it cheaper when they 3-bet me when I open the button with my wider range, but also put less money in pre-flop if they just call with my wider button range. And when I'm not on the button, I want to discourage the person on the button or discourage them from playing the hand. And especially in 250 big blind PLO, being in position is so powerful. So here on the right table, if I were not making a video, I would probably quit this table. I have to be minus EV at a table with, 3 regulars, 2 of which are 100 big blinds deep into my right, and 1 of which is very, very tough and aggressive, 400 big blinds deep to my left. There's no way that, I think there's no way anybody is a favorite in my seat right now, myself included. So I normally would quit this game, but I think it'll put me in a lot of tough spots, which is great for the video. So I decided to continue playing. The first thing I'm going to do, and this maybe took me a little while to decide, but the most drastic adjustment I make in a scenario like this is when I'm in the cutoff, I'm opening a much tighter range than I normally would in the cutoff because he's going to be calling in position so profitably. He's going to be 3-betting in position so often and so profitably. I just cannot open as many hands, and it's as simple as that. And when I'm on the button, I'm in position to him, so I can open my regular wide range, maybe even a little bit wider, because it's tough for him to fight back. But yeah, in the cutoff and in the small blind, when he has position on me, I just have to get out of the way with anything but a strong hand. And I think that's the first adjustment to make. People always, I think, or often think about it the wrong way. When they get deep stacked out of position to a tough player, they think, well, okay, he's 3-betting me a lot, so how do I adjust? I should, start 4-betting a lot, or maybe defending the 3-bets and playing aggressive post flop. But I think, the battle starts before then. It's just you need to start opening far fewer hands. And that, I think, simplifies it a lot. And, by opening that many fewer hands, you now have that much stronger a range, and now you can be, 4-betting his 3-bets if he's still doing it with, 35% of hands, and you're opening with only 15% of hands. You're going to be able to 4-bet him very, very often and, get a decent amount of money in the pot pre-flop with the best of it, and kind of decrease his positional advantage because you're decreasing the stack to pot ratio. And so my strategy in all those cases, when super deep stacked out of position, is just to open a much tighter range, and then when I inevitably get 3-bet by the tough player in position, have a very wide 4-betting range. And by wide, I don't mean actually wide because my opening range is so tight, but wide for my opening range. And that's okay because I legitimately do have a lot of hands I can fight back with. So here on the right table, not that interesting. I c-bet with nothing. Turn top pair. I could bet again, kind of for protection. A little bit of value if he has like a jack plus flush draw or queen jack 10, or if he has like 6 5 4 3, something like that. But I'm a little worried about getting check raise. I decided to just check it back. And now on this river, I mean, whatever, flip a coin. Looks like I decided to fold, but he definitely can have like a 6 5 4, even like ace 6 5 4, and be kind of floating the flop and decide to bluff this river. Or I guess the 4 got there. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm going to correct myself now. I like this fold. Wasn't really paying attention. I kind of just assumed the river was a brick. But this 4 changes things, and all his like his floats like just 6 5 4. His legit draws like 5 4 3. They all got there. So unless he's turning a jack into a bluff or called light on the flop with like 7 7 8 8, 2 of which I have in my hand. Yeah, I think that's a fairly easy fold unless somebody shows me they're turning a jack into a bluff very often there. All right, so jack 8 7 5, double suited, strong enough to open even when I'm tightening up. And I'm very happy he folds even with a decent strong hand like this. Ace jack 6 6 in the big blind. Strong enough to play if the pot goes multi-way. Not strong enough to play heads up against a deep stack tough player. Looks like I excuse me. Wow. Looks like I click auto fold, which I don't like. I think if it goes call call, I can find a profitable call there with a nut suit and a pair. Because yeah, I mean nut suits go way up in value when you play multi-way. That should be pretty obvious because you get in draw over draw situations so much more often, or flush over flush situations. Pairs are always nice, although low pairs get set over set in multi-way pots. So it is. I did choose to two-table this. One, because I wanted to focus really hard on the actual play when I was playing, and try to mix things up as best I could against the regs. But also just kind of to mix it up. When I've been playing 6-max, pretty much I've exclusively done 4-tabling videos, and I miss some hands here and there, and don't get to go as in depth, I think, on some hands because of it. I do think it's probably a slightly better format than this, just because we do have like this dead time in here. But someone like me who can ramble about anything poker related, I feel okay filling it in. I actually want to talk about this hand on the right that I'm not involved in. I remember this well, and it was actually very interesting. The giant raises. I'm actually going to tell you what Booby Smiles has, just so you can kind of play along. And this is a play that I don't make, but I found pretty interesting. Booby Smiles has pocket 4s here for bottom boat, and he donks the flop 321 into 518. I think this is a really good play. Certainly, one for mixing up your ranges. First of all, 994 Rainbow is a board that everything misses like most of the time. So unless your opponent's fighting back a whole heck of a lot of the time, you can take this down with air, with backdoor draws, things like that very often. Because of that, it is good to mix some stronger hands in there. The one thing that's scary for me about 4s is that if your opponent has a 9, he can just call, and then when he boats up and has you drawing dead, can decide to get the rest of the money in. But to be honest, a 9's not folding at any point regardless. So I guess that concern of mine shouldn't be all that big of a concern. I'm curious what he would do if raised in this spot, because obviously the giant should be bluff raising here with a decent frequency, just because I would expect Booby Smiles to be betting here very, very wide. And actually I would expect, before seeing this hand, that he would be much more often bluffy and check with a lot of his stronger hands. So when I saw this at Showdown and saw his 4s, it's a play I don't often make, so I or actually don't ever make, but maybe I'll start. So I took notice. I think it's although not necessarily the most plus EV play in a vacuum. Um, I think it's just very good to have in your arsenal and for balance and things like that. And that's something that I do advocate all the time, but especially in tough games like this against regs. So he sets himself up for a pot-sized river shove. I wouldn't give him much credit at all. I'd probably call him here with kings, like 80% of the time. Um, so a really, really good line by him, in my opinion. And the giant did have a 9, ended up boating up on the river, but regardless of the way they play that hand, the money gets in. But I just found that Booby Smile's line really interesting and something I'd like to incorporate more into my own game. And good for me that he has a few less chips and the giant has a few more, just for my stack situation. And here I replayed the hand because I thought it was really interesting. Was confused about how the action went. Jack 10 8 7 rainbow. I don't know. Yeah, I can find a call. It's a good connected hand. Flop like this, I could consider leading. I can check fold. I can check call. I can check raise. I think everything's okay. I think I might like leading actually best. Turn 2 pair. I think most people's instinct would be to bet here, but I prefer to check. First of all, he will very often check behind straight draws. And then turn a straight here. And if I bet and get raised, that's really ugly. He could also bluff raise me with like flush draws that he checked behind. Also, some regulars are capable of checking behind total air. Let's say like, I don't know, ace jack 5 3 with hearts or something. Going for a delayed c bet, and I think on a card like this, a lot of those hands are like one pair hands that are folding. Either bets or protect or bet as a bluff, and I think I, get one bet in good here with pretty good equity, and also exercise a little bit of pot control. So he bets 300, I call, and the river, if it bricks, is going to be pretty tough. I river a 7, which is great. Excuse me. I think I could go for a river bet, a lead into him, but I feel like I don't rep much air, to be honest. I think he would expect me to lead if I had any kind of like flush draw. So lead the turn is what I mean. So if I do lead this river, I feel like I get a lot of credit for a legit hand, which if I didn't have a legit hand would be a good reason to do so. But since I do, I think that my best shot at making money here is check raising. And the reason I would check raise rather than check call is because I don't expect him to have king 7 ever. I expect him to have 6 7 sometimes. I expect him to have the very rare 8 8, but I expect him to have bluffs and then 9 10, potentially 6 7. So check raise here I think is far better than check calling. And he did have just total air that he checked on the flop, and I don't remember if I took a note, but I think that that's a good note to take on him, that he is capable of checking back on kind of a c-bettable flop, or reasonably c-bettable, with nothing at all. I think that's a good note to take on someone, just because a lot of players don't do that. They just c-bet whenever they have air, which is obviously a fine option, or fine strategy. And I think if you are having trouble, getting into games against regulars, the best way to learn, other than, to keep in mind to like force yourself to do things that you don't usually do, just because it'll, be making plays that they're not expecting. Another thing you can do is, drop down in stakes and play a tough regular heads up. I think that's a great way to learn how to combat the regulars in 6-max games. And, it's kind of like accelerating the process because adjusting to opponents and disguising your ranges and getting an idea of what he expects you to do and doing the opposite is just that much more important in heads-up play. So king 6 5 3, pretty weak but easy button open. Steal the blinds. Ace 8 6 4 would have opened the button, but when Ashman opens, I think I should just fold. Especially with a three better behind me. If Ashman was a weaker player, and if I didn't have an aggressive three better behind me, I would call there pretty much always with the nut suit and somewhat connected hand. So here on the right table, have pretty weak kings. I don't want to 4-bet here. I mean, the thing is with kings this week, I actually could 4-bet and fold comfortably and be pretty happy about it. And, if he just calls, expect that he doesn't have aces, 99% of the time, 98% of the time. So when I do flop like over pair plus gutter, I know that I'm in okay shape against most things. So I don't think it's terrible to 4-bet and fold here. I have to just call. Not a good flop for me. I do have the king of diamonds, which is somewhat element. He goes check, check. I turn 2 pair. And have a very, very easy bet here. It's pretty much impossible for him to raise me, in my opinion, unless he has nothing makes sense for him to raise me here. So I don't think I'm ever getting raised. I think I'm getting called by many worse hands. I also think I want to be betting this turn with, a lot of weaker draws. So this is, obviously need to value bet. A hand like this, it's, almost certainly best. And my plan was to check most rivers, and on a diamond like this, my plan was to check raise bluff, because I do have the king of diamonds. I think it looks very, very credible. I think that he thinks he reps diamonds very well, but I don't think he necessarily does. I mean, he definitely can play diamonds like this, but I think he's actually more likely to have a hand like king, queen, jack, 10 and play it this way. Even though I do have 2 of the kings and 1 of the 10s. Let's say king, queen, jack, 9 then. King, queen, jack, 8. King, queen, jack, 7. Whatever we want to say. Those hands are more likely to check back the flop than, diamonds with, some kind of connectivity, or like top pair plus diamonds, doesn't check it back too often. So he doesn't have a ton of diamonds in his range. I think he more likely does have like a straight draw. And I do think that he'll always bluff with his straight draws, or almost always bluff with his straight draws. And even though I beat those hands, the fact that he has a pretty wide bluffing range on this river makes a check raise bluff more attractive, because not only will he fold sometimes when he's value betting, like a jack high flush here, he'll fold 100% of the times he was bluffing. I think that's really important, and a concept I've talked about before. But when people are considering check raise bluffing, think about the range that your opponent's betting. And check raise bluffing somebody who is never bluffing makes it tougher, and check raise bluffing somebody who is only value betting super strong hands is also a bad idea. You're better off, check folding or check calling if you have some showdown value and think they're bluffing enough. He checked back, and my 10s and 6s won. I was very curious what he had here. And it looked like he had a total float on the turn. I mean, double gut shot, I guess. Important to note that he didn't bet the flop. I think that as much as I like mixing it up against regulars and, not having an 100% c-bet range on a board like this, I think a hand this week, he might be better off just c-betting the flop. Even though a delayed c-bet will often work, I'm going to be betting the turn very often, and he can just take it down on the flop. I think often enough to make it a profitable c-bet. His turn call's fine. I think he gets a lot of credit. I think if the river bricks, he's probably going to bluff. Like, if it's not a diamond, I think he's going to bluff. I'm a little bit surprised he didn't bluff this diamond. But maybe he, I don't know, sniffed something out. And, in this case, he was right. I would have been check raise bluffing him, but obviously there's nothing to do about it with just a 9. So I am surprised, actually, that he checked behind the river there. And a little disappointed, because I would have made a cool check raise bluff and would have worked. And, even though I had the best hand, I wouldn't have known that, so I would have felt cool about it. But yeah, he's doing a good job, and I'll obviously take notes. That he floated turn. where it looked very credible, which is obviously something that I guess I've talked about a few times in this video. Is making a play that looks very credible against regular. Didn't bluff the Diamond River because he's repping more made hands. And I put a question mark. Said I did expect him to bet on a brick river. And then I'm saying that he checked back the flop air after 3-betting with air. After 3-betting and, flopping ace high. And I think those are important notes to take. I have to fold this Queen Jack 9-7. I think no choice being out of position to him. Top left, or just left table. I check behind with top pair on a 3 flush. Turn trips, which is good. He bets into me, and I think I have. Obviously, I'm going to play the hand. I think I can call. I think I can also raise and, potentially get him off some flushes. However, if I get re-raised, I'm in a really gross spot with my 9 outs. So I just call, bank one of my 9 outs against a flush. So I've been running fairly well in these games so far. He checks to me, and I'm obviously going to go for a value bet. Excuse me. I went 550, and kind of quick, just to, I don't know, make him think that I was value betting thinly. I think that people tend to value bet. Well, who knows? Who knows what he thinks of me, but I was expecting he might put me on more thin a value bet if I bet quickly and smaller. So I was trying to induce a bluff raise or, a thin value raise with like bottom set. And on the right table, I flop the lowest possible straight, and I just go for C-bet. I think it's very tough for him to check raise here, and very often he check calls or check folds, and then turn goes check check usually, and then I make a decision on the river. And I'm actually going to wrap up the video at this point. My voice is giving out. I think the more I talk, the drier my throat gets, and the more I cough. I promise I'm working on it. I don't want to be sick, but hopefully I'm better for the next recording. Let me know what you guys thought, specifically about the 2-tabling format. Not something I do too often, but I think it's something that's better at shorter-handed games or games that involve more in-depth thinking. I'm curious what you guys think about that, and then I'm also I know that a lot of people have requested me playing against the regulars, so I know you guys will be happy. But also I know some people who look for softer games don't play much against regulars, so don't really care about this. So I mean, I guess you can both tell me what I'm expecting for you guys to tell me. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Any other questions or comments? I'm looking forward to them. And I will see you guys next week. This is Phil Galfond from BlueFirePoker.com. Take care.